My name is Laura Bentley. I was 32 years old when I refused to give my sister $20,000 for her third round of IVF. That same week, my own parents called 911 and told the dispatcher I had kidnapped my 8-year-old daughter. My mother claimed I was mentally unstable, that I had stopped taking my medication, and that I was a danger to my own child. At that exact moment, Ivy was sitting safely inside her second-grade classroom at Crestwood Elementary, just 20 feet away. She watched in tears as two police cars boxed in my vehicle in the school drop-off zone. What my parents didn't know was that I had been quietly preparing for their betrayal. In my glove box was a blue folder they had never seen, and inside it was the evidence that would completely shatter their lies. Welcome back to Revenger Episodes. This is where we share real stories about the moments that test your family and the quiet strength it takes to protect the people you love most. If this story speaks to you, drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. Tell me where in the world you're listening from tonight. Drop your city and the time in the comments. I read every single one. And to understand what happened that Tuesday morning, you need to go back with me about 2 weeks to where this really started. My apartment in Cary, North Carolina is a 2-bedroom on the second floor of a complex near a park. The kitchen faces east. By 7 in the morning, there's usually enough light coming through the window that I don't need the overhead lamp. And in the winter, when the light comes in cold and pale, Ivy and I eat breakfast in whatever glow we can get and call it enough. Ivy likes the natural light. She says it makes cereal taste better. I have never been able to argue with that logic. Her name is Ivy. She is 8 years old and enrolled in second grade at Crestwood Elementary. She has my stubbornness and her own particular approach to the world, which involves thinking before she speaks, drawing before she decides, and placing her purple backpack by the front door every single night before bed so that she's ready in the morning. She has done this since kindergarten. I didn't teach her that habit. She developed it herself at 5 years old after one too many frantic mornings, and she has never broken it since. The backpack has a small iron-on patch on the side pocket. A dog, golden brown, from a craft fair we went to 2 summers ago. Ivy has been making the case for a real dog since she was 5 years old. Every few months she presents new arguments, each one better organized than the last. Cost analyses, walking schedules, evidence from school friends whose families have dogs and remain intact. The patch was her way of keeping the campaign alive during the intervals. I work as a healthcare revenue cycle coordinator at UNC Health, Cary office. 3 days a week at the building, 2 days at the kitchen table after Ivy leaves for school. It is specific work that requires attention, and I am good at it. And I built this career the way I built everything else in my life after 2021, slowly, with intention, refusing to let anything that could be strengthened stay weak. That year, 2021, is where you need to start if you want to understand what happened 4 years later. Ivy's father is Nathan Crawford. We were never married. We were together for 3 years, and when Ivy was about 2 years old, the relationship began unraveling the way some relationships do. Not with a single breaking point, but with a growing distance that neither of us had the language to close. He accepted a long-term contract position in London when Ivy was not quite 3. He was honest about it. He told me he didn't see how to do it all. The distance, the co-parenting, the back and forth. And he offered to voluntarily terminate his parental rights so I could move forward with a clean custody order and not be waiting for someone who would never fully arrive. I thought about it for a long time. I talked to a lawyer. I read about how these decisions play out over years. And then I said yes. In April of 2021, Wake County Family Court finalized the order. Case number 2, 1-CVD-0836. Sole legal and physical custody of Ivy Bentley, granted to Laura Bentley. Ivy was 3 years and 7 months old at the time. She called Nathan the tall man by then. She didn't ask where he'd gone for nearly a year after that, And when she finally did ask, I told her he had moved far away and that he thought about her. She looked at me with the careful attentiveness she brought to information she was filing away for later, and she said, "Okay." And that was that. I was 27 years old. I was raising my daughter alone. I was building something from scratch, and I was determined to make it last. The first year was the hardest, not because I couldn't manage, I could, but because managing alone has a particular weight to it that you don't notice until you're in it. There's no one to call when Ivy has a fever at 2 in the morning and you can't tell if it's serious. There's no one to say it's going to be fine and mean it from experience. You get through it, and then you get through the next thing, and eventually you stop measuring the days that way. You just live them. That is when my parents became more involved. My mother Beverly and my father Donald live about 12 minutes from my apartment, a straight shot down Kildare Farm Road. For 2 years, roughly from mid-2021 through 2023, Beverly came over 2 or 3 days a week to watch Ivy while I worked. She would arrive in the morning with something in a Tupperware container and leave in the afternoon after Ivy's nap, and the arrangement worked. I was grateful. I told her so regularly, and I meant it. What I noticed over time was the language Beverly used to describe what she was doing. She never called it helping, she called it stepping in. That distinction is small enough that you might read right past it, but I think about it now and I think it was the key to everything. Helping is something you do for someone alongside them. Stepping in is what you do when someone has stepped out, when someone has failed to manage what they were supposed to manage, and you have to fill the gap. Beverly was always very clear, in her word choices, if not in her explicit statements, that I was someone who required stepping in. Someone who had not managed adequately on her own and for whom Beverly was perpetually compensating. She never said it with cruelty. That is what made it so effective. "We were always there for you, Lara," she told me once, sitting at my kitchen table while I stood at the stove making dinner for all of us. She said it in the same voice she used to point out that it might rain. When Nathan left, when you couldn't get out of bed, when Ivy needed someone, we were always there. The fact that she was right, that the facts themselves were accurate, made it harder to respond to, not easier. What was off was not the content but the framing. What was off was that she used every accurate fact as a brick in a structure she was building, the structure of my debt to her. I should explain the couldn't get out of bed part, because Beverly would eventually use it against me in a very specific way, and I want you to understand exactly what it was and what it was not. After Ivy was born in 2017, I struggled. The clinical term is postpartum depression, and I had a real case of it. Not the mild, transient kind, but the kind that settles in slowly over weeks and months, the kind that makes simple tasks feel like lifting things underwater. I found a therapist through my insurance. I took medication for about 5 months. I worked through it with the right support. And by the summer of 2018, I was on the other side of it. Not because Beverly intervened or because she carried me through. She was present. But the actual work of recovery was mine and my therapist's. But because I asked for help from the right source, and I did the work. I had told Beverly about the therapy and the medication because at the time I believed that being open with family was the right approach. I was 24 years old. I was struggling. I thought honesty was the same thing as safety. I would spend the next 7 years thinking about that decision. My sister Amber is 3 years younger than me. She is 28 years old and has been engaged to Cole Whitfield, a 31-year-old architect, since March of 2024. She is beautiful in the way that makes people want to do things for her, and she has spent her entire life surrounded by people who wanted to do things for her. And our parents have always been at the front of that line. This is not something Amber chose. She was raised this way. It is the only world she has ever known, And I think she genuinely doesn't understand that it's a different world from the one I grew up in the same house, with the same parents. When we were in college, I worked 20 hours a week at the campus library to help cover my expenses. Amber's expenses were covered entirely. When I bought my first car in 2019, I'd saved for 18 months and bought a used Honda Civic with 80,000 miles on it and a passenger side door that didn't quite close flush. When Amber needed a car in 2022, my father called his bank and co-signed her loan. When I mentioned once that I was hoping to buy a house someday, that I was saving toward it, that it was the goal, my father said, "Make sure you're financially ready before you commit to anything." When Amber and Cole announced their engagement, my father took Cole aside and said, "What do you need from us?" I noticed. I kept noticing. After a while, noticing becomes something you carry differently, not exactly bitterness, but a kind of exhausted understanding. The map of how your family works, finally legible. What changed was when Amber started IVF. She and Cole began their first round of in vitro fertilization in the summer of 2024. It failed. The second round, in October of 2024, failed as well. I want to say clearly, I know what that kind of loss feels like. 2 rounds of IVF, 2 failures, and the particular grief that follows each one is something I would not wish on anyone. Amber wanted to be a mother. That is real, and I am not dismissing it. But my mother knew how to weaponize it. She was extraordinarily skilled at that. The night the second cycle failed, Beverly called me. It was a Thursday evening. Ivy was at the kitchen table drawing stars in the margins of her math homework, the way she always did. Beverly's voice on the phone was low and grieved. She said Amber was devastated. She said the whole family needed to be behind her. She said she hoped I understood what Amber was going through. Then, the following Sunday, Beverly came over for dinner. At some point while Ivy was in the living room coloring, Beverly looked at me across the kitchen table. She waited until the timing was right, until Ivy had wandered far enough away that I would hear without being interrupted. And she said, in a voice just above a murmur, "Do you know what it's like to want a child and not be able to have one?" She looked at Ivy when she said it. She held that look for just a moment, then glanced back at me. She didn't need to say anything else. The implication was the most complete sentence I had heard from her in years. You have what Amber wants. You owe her something for that. I have turned that moment over many times since then. The specificity of it. The calculated use of Ivy's presence in that room at that exact moment. Beverly knew what she was doing. She had been building toward it. I just couldn't yet see the full architecture. What Beverly was constructing was a moral arrangement in which I had something Amber wanted, and that meant I owed Amber something, and that refusing would make me the person who had looked at her sister's empty arms and chosen to keep walking. She was using my daughter's life, Ivy's specific, real, daily life, as an argument for why I didn't deserve to keep the money that would eventually give Ivy a backyard and 2 dogs, and a life that was ours outright. I want to pause here and ask you something directly. If someone took the hardest season of your life, the season when you were most vulnerable, when you needed the most help, and then, years later, handed you a bill for it, what would that feel like? Drop it in the comments. Because I think more people have sat across a table from that kind of accounting than ever talk about it. In June of 2025, my parents hosted a family dinner. Amber and Cole were there. Ivy ate at the table with the adults and then asked if she could go draw, which I said yes to. And Beverly waited until Ivy had settled in the living room before she said what she had come to say. She said they had been thinking about this for a while. She said Amber's 3rd round was coming up. Amber and Cole had taken time off after the second failure to recover, and they were planning to try again later in the year. She said there were also the wedding deposits for Cancun. She said the family needed help with $20,000. I heard the whole construction of that sentence. Not just the number, the framing, the family needed help. As though the $20,000 would go towards something shared, something collective, as though I would be the only one choosing whether the family got what it needed. Beverly said the IVF alone was $9,000 out of pocket. Insurance barely covered anything, she said. The other $11,000 was for the wedding, a destination ceremony in Cancun in September, which was what Amber had always dreamed of. I asked questions. I asked how much Cole's insurance plan covered for fertility treatment. I asked what the clinic actually billed per cycle. I asked what was medically necessary versus what fell under elective classification. Beverly deflected every single question. She acknowledged none of them as reasonable. She turned the conversation back to Amber's pain, to what the family had done for me over the years, to what kind of sister I was planning to be. I didn't push. I said I would think about it. On the drive home, Ivy fell asleep in her car seat before we left the neighborhood. I drove in the quiet and went over the numbers in my head. 9,000 out of pocket for a single IVF cycle. I had tried to look up fertility treatment costs in North Carolina online before the dinner. What I'd found hadn't matched that figure. Not even close. Beverly brought the $20,000 up every time I saw her for the next 9 months. She framed it differently each time. As a family responsibility, as a gift to Amber, as an investment in the kind of sister I could be. I kept saying I was still thinking. I kept trying to find the actual numbers. I kept getting deflected. In January of 2026, there was a second family dinner with a different energy. My father, Donald, sat at the head of the table. He waited until the food was cleared and then he said, in the same measured voice he used for everything, "We're not threatening you, Lara. We're just saying that if you're not willing to be part of this family, then we need to think very carefully about what's best for Ivy. That's all." Ivy's living situation, her stability. Those were the specific words he chose. I drove home with Ivy asleep in the back seat. Her head was tilted against the car seat, her purple backpack beside her on the seat. I watched the familiar streets of Cary go past and I kept very still inside the specific way I had learned to be still when something needed to be processed carefully. I called Nora Vance's office first thing the next morning. Nora is a family law attorney based out of Raleigh, Durham. I had been referred to her by a colleague who had gone through her own custody dispute a few years earlier. I made an appointment, went in on a cold February morning, sat down across from a woman in her mid-40s with reading glasses on a chain and a manila folder already open on the table, and explained everything. Beverly's pattern. The $20,000, the IVF framing, Donald's January statement about stability and living situations. Nora listened without writing anything down for the first several minutes. When I finished, she looked at me over her glasses. "The phrase, Ivy's living situation," she said. "Did your father say that more than once?" I said yes. "And stability? Specifically in the context of your capacity as a parent?" I said yes. She nodded slowly. "That language does not appear by accident in the context of a custody situation. Someone chose those words carefully, or they've been reading about what it takes to initiate a challenge." She told me to document everything. Every call, every text, every voicemail, every email. Screenshot them. Save them. Never delete anything. She told me to keep a running folder, on my phone, on my laptop, somewhere she could access, of every communication from my parents and Amber related to either the money or Ivy. She told me to note dates and times. And then, before I left, she said, "At some point in the near future, soon, I need you to make a laminated copy of your custody order and keep it in your car. Glove box, not the house." I wrote all of it down. I started the documentation immediately, the folder on my phone, the screenshots, the timestamps. But I did not make the laminated copy that day. I put it on a list of things to do soon. I would do it soon. I just didn't know yet what soon was going to mean. In March of 2026, Amber posted in the family group chat photos of a resort in Cancun, the outdoor ceremony space, the colonial arches, the turquoise water visible beyond the grounds, the honeymoon suite. She was bubbling over with it, the way Amber was always bubbling over with things my parents made possible. I looked at those photos for a long time. The $11,000. The portion of the $20,000 that Beverly had labeled wedding expenses. I had assumed she meant something local, something modest. What I was looking at was a destination resort in Mexico. I started doing more focused research, specifically into what employer-sponsored fertility benefits looked like in North Carolina in late 2024, after several major insurers had updated their coverage policies. What I found made me more determined to get a straight answer about those IVF numbers. I tried, gently, twice more in March, to ask Beverly specific questions about costs. She deflected both times with such practiced ease that I had to admire it, in a cold way, the way you admire a mechanism that works exactly as designed. Thursday, April 2nd. Beverly had been watching Ivy for the afternoon while I covered a deadline at work. When she dropped Ivy off that evening, she handed me a small stack of mail with the efficient distraction of someone already thinking about something else. "Found some of yours mixed in with Amber's old stuff while I was cleaning out my home office," she said. "I've been meaning to return these for a while." She didn't look at the stack when she handed it over. She kissed Ivy on the top of the head, said goodnight, and left. I put the stack on the kitchen counter and called Ivy for dinner. Rice and vegetables, and something Ivy requested I call the noodle thing, which is a pasta recipe she decided was her favorite, sometime in first grade, and has never rescinded. I didn't go through the mail that evening. There were dishes and homework and a chapter of a book Ivy was working through, and by the time she was asleep, I was tired enough to leave the stack where it was. It wasn't until Friday evening, Ivy's bedtime, apartment quiet, a cup of tea cooling on the table, that I sat down and started opening things. A birthday card from my Aunt Helen, postmarked 3 weeks prior. 2 pieces of junk mail addressed to a previous tenant. A small package that turned out to be a memory card I'd ordered online and forgotten about. And then a white envelope with the Blue Cross Blue Shield of North Carolina logo in the upper left corner. The name on the front was Amber Sutton. The address was 142 Willowbrook Drive, Cary, North Carolina, my parents' house. There was a forwarding sticker over the original address, my mother's handwriting. My address, written in the same pen she always used for grocery lists and birthday cards. I almost set it aside. It wasn't mine. But something made me stop. I looked at the forwarding sticker. Beverly's handwriting. My address. The fact that it had come to me inside a stack Beverly had found while cleaning her office. The months of deflected questions about insurance costs. The $9,000 figure that had never once matched anything I could find independently. I opened it. The letter was a benefit summary statement. It had been generated by Cole's employer's health insurance plan, Blue Cross Blue Shield NC Premier Plan, and dated December of 2024, when Amber had enrolled in Cole's benefits package at his architecture firm and indicated she would be pursuing fertility treatment. It had been mailed to 142 Willowbrook Drive because that was the address on Amber's old enrollment form before she had fully updated her information to reflect her new address with Cole. I read the key figures. Estimated procedure cost per cycle, $12,500. Plan coverage, $8,500. Member estimated responsibility, $4,000. My mother had told me $9,000. For 8 months. $9,000 out of pocket. Insurance barely covers anything. You have Ivy. Don't you want your sister to have a chance at a baby? $9,000? The number in my hands was 4,000. I read it 3 times. Then I put it flat on the table and looked at it for a long time. Then I photographed it. Both sides. Held up to the kitchen light so the numbers were completely clear. Then I photographed it a second time. The math was not complicated. Beverly had inflated the IVF out-of-pocket cost by $5,000, and the other $11,000, the Cancun resort, the ceremony package, the honeymoon suite Amber had posted about in the group chat. None of that had ever been a medical expense. It had been a destination wedding funded through a guilt trip built on 2 IVF failures, and a mother who knew exactly which memories of mine would hurt the most to touch. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time. I called Nora Vance's office and left a message. Saturday morning, April 4th. I drove to Beverly's house. She answered the door in her weekend clothes. Comfortable slacks, a light blouse, the reading glasses she kept around the house. She looked surprised to see me, but not alarmed. She stepped back to let me in, and I came in and sat down at the same kitchen table where we'd had the June dinner. I had left the insurance letter at home. I wasn't there to show it to her. I was there to ask one more question. I said, "Mom, how much does the IVF actually cost after the insurance?" She answered without hesitating, "At least 9,000. The insurance barely touches it. You could look it up yourself if you don't believe me." She said it with the exact same fluency she had used every other time. Not defensive, not evasive. Just stating a fact, the way she always stated facts that weren't facts. I held her gaze for a moment. Then I said, "I'm sorry, Mom. I can't do it." Beverly went very still. The kind of still that isn't calm but its opposite. Compressed. Held. Like something that requires effort to contain. Several seconds passed. Then she said, "You are going to regret this." Not you'll regret it. You are going to regret this. Future tense. Patient. Already on the other side of whatever came next. Already in the position of someone watching a consequence arrive. I stood up, walked to the front door, and got into my car. I watched her in the rearview mirror, standing in the doorway in her weekend clothes, watching me drive away. She didn't move until I turned the corner. The messages started Sunday. Beverly, think about your sister. Think about what you're doing to this family. Monday she called 3 times. I let them go to voicemail. Tuesday, my father texted. He wrote, "Laura, we're genuinely concerned about whether your current situation provides Ivy with the stability she needs. We think we should have a conversation about this before things go further." I read that message twice. I thought about Nora's voice in February, the way she'd said that stability and living situation don't appear by accident in this context. I screenshotted it and added it to the folder on my phone. Wednesday, Amber. You've never wanted good things for me, not once. I hope you know what you're doing to this family. Thursday, April 9th. Beverly left a voicemail. It was 2 minutes and 40 seconds long. I know because I timed it before I saved it. "Laura, I know you think you're making the right decision, but I know about your therapist. I know you went through a very difficult period after Ivy was born, and I know there were medications involved. I still have that doctor's contact information. I am going to do what I have to do to make sure Ivy is safe. I hope it doesn't come to that." She said it calmly, the way she said everything that was calculated, as though she had rehearsed it, decided on it, and was now simply delivering it. I listened to it twice. Then I called Nora. Nora picked up on the second ring. I told her about the voicemail. I read her the text from my father. I described the insurance letter. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Laminate your custody order. Today. Not this weekend, not tomorrow. Today. Get it laminated, put it in a blue folder, and put that folder in your glove box. Starting now, Beverly does not have unsupervised contact with Ivy. I drove to the copy shop on Maynard Road that same afternoon. I handed the custody order over. When it came back, laminated, warm from the machine, I slid it into a blue folder with a clear plastic front and put the folder in the glove box of my car and closed the compartment. At that point, I understood what I was doing. I understood that I was preparing for something. I just did not know how specific that preparation was about to become. The weekend was full of Beverly's calls. Saturday, 3 of them. Sunday, 2 more, plus a voicemail. Short this time. "This is not over, Lara." I added them all to the folder. Monday morning, April 13th. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and typed a message carefully, read it twice, and sent it at 9:45 a.m. I wrote, "Mom, I've thought about this for a long time and I've made my final decision. I cannot give Amber the $20,000. I love you both, and I'm sorry." The read receipt came through at 7:12 p.m. What Beverly did next, I learned 11 days later from documents I requested and received and read at this same kitchen table after Ivy was asleep. Tuesday, April 14th. The morning was ordinary. Ivy's purple backpack was by the front door where she had left it the night before, the dog patch facing up, ready for school. She ate cereal at the kitchen table while I stood at the counter with coffee and went through work emails. She asked if I thought Mrs. Patterson would do art today. I told her I hoped so. She considered this information, nodded, and went to brush her teeth. At 7:40, I pulled into the drop-off zone at Crestwood Elementary. Ivy hopped out, hitched her backpack onto her shoulder, and turned back to wave at me through the window. Mrs. Calloway, the school secretary, was standing near the front entrance doing her morning check. Ivy waved at her too. I watched her go through the doors. I put the car in drive and started to leave. Here is what I learned afterward from the supplemental police report that Cary PD completed as part of their criminal investigation. At 7:15 a.m., while I was making coffee and Ivy was eating cereal, and both of us were starting our ordinary Tuesday, my mother sent my sister Amber a text message. She wrote, "Lara drops Ivy at Crestwood every Tuesday at 7:40. I'm calling now." Amber's reply at 7:18 a.m. was, "Do it now, Mom. She won't give us the money anyway." At 7:42 a.m., Beverly called 911. She told the dispatcher she didn't know where her granddaughter was. She said her daughter had a history of mental illness and had stopped taking her medication after the baby was born. She said she was afraid her daughter could be a danger to the child. She said there should be a custody arrangement giving her and her husband rights. She said she didn't know where they were. She said this 27 minutes after telling Amber exactly where we were. At 7:48 a.m., 2 Cary Police Department cruisers activated their lights behind my car as I was leaving the drop-off zone. I was perhaps 100 feet from the school's front entrance. I pulled over. In the side mirror, I watched Officer Patrick Reeves step out of the first car and walk toward me. The second car pulled alongside and stopped. Officer Reeves had his hand near his belt. His expression was flat and controlled. I rolled down the window. He said, "Ma'am, I need you to remain in your vehicle. We received a report of a child abduction in progress. Can you tell me where your daughter is?" Everything in my body went still. "My daughter just walked through those front doors," I said. 8 minutes ago. I watched her go in." The caller stated you had taken a minor child in violation of an active custody order and that the caller was unaware of the child's whereabouts. "There is no other custody order," I said. "I have sole legal and physical custody. The paperwork is in my car right now." "Can you show me?" I reached for the glove box. The blue folder was exactly where I had put it 4 days earlier, warm from the laminating machine. I handed it through the window. Officer Reeves opened it. He read the custody order. His eyes moved across the page with the careful thoroughness of someone taking inventory. He read it a second time. He looked up at me and then back at the document. He said, "Give me a moment." He stepped back from my car. He got on his radio. I could see his lips moving but couldn't hear the words. The second officer, Officer Mills, got out of his cruiser and walked toward the school entrance. I put both hands back on the steering wheel. I kept them visible. I kept them still. Inside Crestwood Elementary, Officer Mills went to the front desk and asked for Ivy Bentley. Mrs. Calloway confirmed that Ivy had come in at 7:40 on schedule and walked him to Mrs. Patterson's second-grade classroom at the front of the building. The front of the building. Ivy's classroom was in the front wing of Crestwood Elementary, with windows that looked out over the parking lot and the drop-off zone. Ivy was sitting at her desk when she saw the police lights through the glass. She was 8 years old and she understood what police lights meant the way all children understand things they've absorbed from the edges of adult conversations and movies, and the particular way a room changes when something is wrong. She started crying before anyone in that classroom could reach her. Mrs. Patterson later filed an incident report. It was 2 paragraphs long in the standard school format, clinical and precise. It said the student became visibly distressed upon observing police vehicles in the drop-off area at approximately 7:49 a.m., that she was unable to resume class activities, and that she required individual support for approximately 40 minutes. 40 minutes. That is how long my 8-year-old daughter cried that morning because her grandmother had placed a call from 12 minutes away with Ivy's drop-off time already documented in her phone, and told a dispatcher she had no idea where her granddaughter was. Officer Reeves came back to my window at 8:03. He lowered his voice. "Ma'am, these documents show you hold sole legal and physical custody of Ivy Bentley, granted by Wake County Family Court. There is no competing order in our system. No grandparent custody arrangement of any kind on file anywhere." He paused. "The caller stated such an arrangement existed. It does not." I said, "There is no such arrangement. There never was one. Can I ask, do you know who may have made this report?" "My mother," I said. "Beverly Sutton." He wrote the name in his notepad. He wrote it slowly and completely, the way someone writes when they want the record to be correct. Then he looked up. "Your mother may have just committed a felony. Under North Carolina law, specifically, North Carolina General Statute 14-225.1, filing a false police report that accuses a specific person of committing a felony crime is itself a Class H felony. Kidnapping is a felony under North Carolina law. Beverly had reported a kidnapping. She had named a specific person. The statute was precise. What she had done was not a misdemeanor overstep or a panicked mistake. It was a criminal accusation made to emergency services, documented in a transcript, attached to a police report, and now sitting in a file at Cary PD with her name on the reporting line. Officer Reeves returned to his vehicle to complete the report. Before he left, he handed me a paper with the case number, CPD-2-026-0414. I photographed it. I sat in the school parking lot for 17 minutes. I know because I watched the clock on my dashboard. I did not cry. I was too angry for that. And beneath the anger there was something colder and more useful. A clarity that had been accumulating for weeks and had now gone completely solid. I knew what I had. I knew what I was going to need. And I knew that every text, every voicemail, every deflected question, every inflated dollar figure, and every word my mother had said to a dispatcher at 7:42 in the morning was now part of a documented record that she did not yet understand existed. I called Nora. She picked up on the second ring. She told me to sit where I was, breathe, and call her back when I was ready. I sat. I breathed. I called her back 7 minutes later. She said, "Don't go home yet. Don't contact your parents. Don't contact Amber. Sit where you are until you're ready to drive. Then pick up Ivy at 3:15 and go home." "What happens next?" I asked. She said, "You bring me everything you have tomorrow morning, and we start." I sat in that parking lot for another 10 minutes after we hung up. I watched the school. Children were inside, moving through the normal machinery of a Tuesday. Class rotations, snack time, the long, ordinary stretch of a morning that Ivy had been crying through for 30 of the last 40 minutes, because of a phone call her grandmother had placed from 12 minutes away. I thought about what Beverly had done, and I thought about what she had assumed. She had assumed that a 911 call, the weight of it, the fear of it, the possibility of being labeled unstable in a public record, would be enough to make me give in. She had used every tool at her disposal: my history, my daughter, emergency services, a dispatcher who had no reason not to believe her. She had moved fast, and she had moved precisely. What she had not accounted for was the blue folder in my glove box. What she had not accounted for was the folder on my phone labeled Family, with 90 days of screenshots already in it. What she had not accounted for was the letter on my kitchen table that she herself had accidentally handed to me 2 days earlier. At 3:15 p.m., I picked up Ivy from school. She came through the front doors and got in the car and settled into her seat with her backpack in her lap. In the car, she was quiet for a while, watching the streets through the window with that attentive, internal expression she gets when she's working something out. Then she said, "Mommy, why were there police cars at school today?" I told her there had been some confusion that morning and that everything was okay now. She thought about that. "Were they looking for me?" I looked at her in the rearview mirror. She was sitting straight, watching me, waiting for an accurate answer. I said, "They found out very quickly that you were safe and exactly where you were supposed to be." She was quiet for another moment. Then she looked back out the window. "Okay," she said. Just that. One word, with all the weight of an 8-year-old who has decided to trust the person driving her home. That evening, she drew at the kitchen table while I washed dishes. She drew our apartment, the east-facing kitchen window, the table between us, the shape of the space we had. She put it on the refrigerator before she went to bed, carefully, next to the older drawings that were already there. After she was asleep, I opened the locked file box I kept under the desk and added the police report. I added the photo of the case number. I added the memory of what Officer Reeves had said, and the exact way he had said it. At 9:30, I called Nora. She picked up on the second ring. Wednesday, April 15th. Nora's office. The conference table between us, covered in documents. We made 2 lists. What we already had: the custody order, Wake County case number 21-CVD-0836. Police report CPD-2-026-0414 with Beverly Sutton as reporting party. Beverly's April 9th voicemail. Donald's text about stability and living situations. Amber's text. The full communication chain from June 2025 through April 13th, 2026, documenting the $20,000 request, the deflected questions, Donald's January ultimatum, and the formal refusal sent at 9:45 a.m. on April 13th. Read at 7:12 p.m., the BCBSNC benefit summary, showing $4,000 in member responsibility, not $9,000. The school pickup authorization form with my name as the only authorized contact for Ivy. What we needed to get: the 911 call transcript, Officer Reeves's body cam footage, Mrs. Patterson's school incident report, Beverly's phone records from the morning of April 14th, which Cary PD would be obtaining as part of their criminal investigation. "When we get the 911 transcript," Nora said, marking a note in the margin of her legal pad, "we'll know exactly what your mother told the dispatcher. And when we compare that to her phone records from that morning, we'll know whether it was deliberate or impulsive." She already knew it was deliberate. We both did. But evidence has to speak for itself, and we were building the file that would let it do that. The following morning, Thursday the 16th, Nora filed an emergency motion to restrict contact at Wake County Family Court, requesting that Beverly and Donald Sutton be restricted from all unsupervised contact with Ivy pending a hearing. She also sent a certified letter to Beverly's house, not an email, a physical letter, stating that our client had been made aware that you placed a 911 call on April 14th, in which you made statements that appeared to be materially false regarding the custody status of Ivy Bentley, including the fabricated claim that a competing custody arrangement existed, granting rights to Ivy's maternal grandparents. The letter named the applicable statute and described the potential consequences. Beverly received it on April 18th. She called my number 6 times between 4 and 6 p.m. that afternoon. I did not answer any of them. On Friday the 17th, Nora filed 2 separate requests with Cary PD. The first was a public records request under North Carolina General Statute, Chapter 132, for the 911 call transcript. The second was a court petition under North Carolina General Statute 132-1.4a for Officer Reeves's body cam footage, which in North Carolina cannot be released through a standard records request, but requires a judicial order. We expected the transcript within 3 to 5 business days. We expected the body cam footage within 10. Both arrived before April 24th. Tuesday, April 21st. Nora called at 11 in the morning. "I need you to come in today," she said. "The transcript came in this morning, and CPD sent over a supplemental package." I drove to her office and sat down at the conference table. She placed 2 documents in front of me without comment. The first was the 911 transcript. Beverly had told the dispatcher, "I don't know where my granddaughter is. My daughter has a history of mental illness. She stopped taking her medication after her baby was born. I'm afraid she could be a danger to my granddaughter. There should be a custody arrangement giving us rights." She took Ivy without our knowledge. The second document was the CPD supplemental report. Cary PD had obtained Beverly's phone records as part of their criminal investigation into the potential Class H felony filing, something they had the legal authority to do quickly because they were investigating a criminal act, not waiting on a civil court timeline. At 7:15 a.m., Beverly had sent Amber a text. "Laura drops Ivy at Crestwood every Tuesday at 7:40. I'm calling now." At 7:18 a.m., Amber had replied, "Do it now, Mom. She won't give us the money anyway." At 7:42 a.m., Beverly had told a dispatcher she didn't know where her granddaughter was. 27 minutes. The distance between "I'm calling now" and "I don't know where they are." I read both documents twice. Then I looked up at Nora. She said, 27 minutes. And we have Amber on it too. I had known my mother was behind the call. I had been certain of that from the moment Officer Reeves asked if I knew who might have made the report. Knowing that Amber had actively pushed for it, had sent that text at 7:18, had said, "Do it now," settled something in my chest that I hadn't known was unsettled. Not with anger, with something closer to finality. I said, "What does Amber's text mean for the hearing?" Nora said, "It shows the court that this was not an impulsive decision made alone. Your mother had someone encouraging her. She had a collaborator. And she had your daughter's school and drop-off time in her phone at 7:15 a.m., 27 minutes before she told dispatch she had no idea where Ivy was. That is not good faith. That is premeditation." On Wednesday the 22nd, the body cam footage arrived. 22 minutes of Officer Reeves's camera from the moment he activated it approaching my car to the moment he returned to his vehicle after filing the initial report. You could see the blue folder being passed through the window. You could see him read the custody order, fold it back into the folder, and step away. You could hear every word. Clear. Continuous. Preserved. Beverly's attorney had sent a response to our motion around the same time. The response argued that Beverly had acted in good faith, based on a reasonable and sincere concern for her granddaughter's well-being, given her long-standing awareness of her daughter's documented mental health challenges. It described Beverly as a devoted grandmother motivated by love. It used the phrase, good faith, 3 times in 4 paragraphs. Nora read it to me over the phone. There was a pause. Then she said, "Good faith. Let's see how that argument holds up next to a 7:15 a.m. text." Thursday evening, April 23rd. 2 hours in Nora's office going through the sequence of exhibits. Exhibit A, Wake County Family Court Custody Order, Case number 21-CVD-0836. Sole legal and physical custody. Exhibit B, Police Report CPD-2 026-0414. Beverly Sutton, reporting party. Exhibit C, Beverly's voicemail, April 9th. I still have your doctor's contact information. I am going to do what I have to do. Exhibit D, Donald Sutton's April 7th text, living situation, stability. Exhibit E, the full communication chain, June 2025 through April 13th, 2026. The $20,000 request, the deflections, the January ultimatum, the formal refusal, sent 9:45 a.m., read 7:12 p.m. Exhibit F, BCBS-NC Benefit Summary, 12,500 total, 8,500 covered, 4,000 member responsibility, not 9,000, 4,000. Exhibit G, Mrs. Patterson's incident report. Student distressed approximately 40 minutes. Exhibit H, the 911 transcript. I don't know where my granddaughter is. Exhibit I, Beverly's 7:15 a.m. text, I'm calling now. Exhibit J, Amber's 7:18 a.m. reply, do it now, Mom. Exhibit K, 22 minutes of body cam footage. Before I left, Nora said, "Don't speak unless I signal you. If the judge addresses you directly, answer directly. Nothing extra. Let the documents speak." I went home and made dinner. Ivy worked on her reading at the kitchen table while I cooked. Afterward, she drew again at the table, the way she had been drawing every evening for 2 weeks. Our apartment, the east-facing window, the 2 of us at the kitchen table in the morning light. She put it on the refrigerator beside the others without saying anything. I stood at the sink and looked at the collection of them, 6 drawings now, all of the same subject, all of the same message, and I thought that this was what I was protecting. Not a legal outcome, not a court order. This exact ordinary piece. Friday, April 24th. Wake County Family Court, 9 a.m. The hearing room was clean and plain and quiet, with the specific quiet of a place where important things happen on a regular schedule. I sat beside Nora. Beverly sat across the room with her attorney, Donald, beside her, both of them looking at the table. Amber was not there. The gallery was small, a few people waiting for their own hearings, a court aide at the back. And then, in the second row, I saw Helen Garland. Helen is my father's older sister. She is 67, with silver hair that she keeps short and a composed, watchful presence that I had always associated with directness. She had been closer to my mother than to me for most of my adult life, had heard Beverly's accounting of my history and my choices without any particular reason to question it. I had not expected to see her in that room. She was sitting with her hands folded in her lap. When Beverly walked in, Helen did not look at her. Judge Ann Strickland entered at 9:03. She sat, arranged her file, and looked at both tables. Beverly's attorney went first. He was practiced and composed. He talked about Beverly's 4 years of regular involvement in Ivy's life, about her consistency as a grandmother, about her long-standing awareness of my postpartum depression history. He used the phrase, good faith, 3 times. He described Beverly as a grandmother motivated by love who had, in a moment of genuine concern, taken a step that she believed was in Ivy's best interest. He said that her call was reasonable in context. He said it was made out of care. Beverly sat straight through all of it, composed. She did not look at me. When he finished, Nora stood up. "Thank you," she said to the judge, and then she began. She presented each exhibit in order. She placed each document on the judge's table as she introduced it, without commentary beyond what was necessary to identify it. Her voice was even and unhurried. Exhibit A, the custody order, no modifications, no competing arrangements. Exhibit B, the police report, Beverly Sutton, reporting party. The child found safe in her classroom at Crestwood Elementary within minutes of the report. Exhibit C, she played the voicemail through the small speaker on the conference table. "I know about your therapist. I know there were medications. I still have that doctor's contact information. I am going to do what I have to do." The room was very still during the voicemail. Beverly did not move. Exhibit D, Donald's text, living situation, stability. Exhibit E, the full text chain, going back to June 2025, ending with the read receipt at 7:12 p.m. on April 13th. Exhibit F, the insurance letter, $12,500, $8,500 covered, $4,000 member responsibility. Nora placed it on the judge's table without a word of commentary. Exhibit G, Mrs. Patterson's incident report. Student distressed approximately 40 minutes. Exhibit H, the 911 transcript. "I don't know where my granddaughter is." Exhibit I, Judge Strickland picked it up. She read it again, set it down. Then she looked up at Beverly. She said, "Mrs. Sutton, at 7:15 in the morning, you sent your daughter Amber the following text message." She read it aloud in the same measured tone she had used for everything else. "Lara drops Ivy at Crestwood every Tuesday at 7:40. I'm calling now." She set the paper down on the table. 27 minutes later, you told a 911 dispatcher. She picked up Exhibit H and quoted directly, "I don't know where my granddaughter is." A pause. Long enough that I became aware of the air conditioning. These two statements, made less than 30 minutes apart, cannot both be true. Beverly's attorney began to say something. Judge Strickland raised one hand, palm out, and he stopped. She looked at Exhibit J. She read Amber's reply aloud. "Do it now, Mom. She won't give us the money anyway." Then she picked up Exhibit F again, the insurance letter, and held it for a moment. She looked at Beverly. "Can you explain the discrepancy between the $4,000 member responsibility shown in this benefits summary and the $9,000 figure that appears consistently in your communications with the petitioner?" The room waited. Beverly's attorney leaned over and spoke quietly into her ear. She shook her head once, very slightly. Judge Strickland did not press for an answer. She wrote something in her notes. She reviewed the file. She took her time. Then she issued her order. Effective immediately, Beverly Sutton and Donald Sutton were prohibited from all contact with Lara Bentley and Ivy Bentley for a period of 12 months. The matter was referred to the Wake County District Attorney's Office for potential criminal charges under North Carolina General Statute 14-225.1. A supervised visitation review could be requested by proper motion at the close of the 12-month period. I sat and listened to all of it. I had been building toward this moment for weeks, had organized every document, had reconstructed every timestamp, had sat in Nora's office going through exhibits in order until I knew them in my sleep. And now that the order had been read, what I felt was not triumph. It was a deep and specific exhaustion, the kind that comes after you have held something heavy for a long time and have finally, carefully, put it down. Beverly did not look at me when the ruling was read. She sat straight through it, hands folded on the table in front of her, absolutely still. Donald stared at the table. He had stared at the table for most of the hearing. The room began to clear. In the hallway outside the courtroom, while Nora reviewed paperwork with her assistant, I felt a hand on my elbow. Helen Garland. She was standing close, looking at me with an expression I had not seen on her face before, something open and unguarded, without any of the careful, maintained distance that had always characterized how she treated me in Beverly's presence. She said, "I owe you an apology, Lara. I believed her for too long. I'm sorry." I looked at her. I thought about the years of it. The accumulation of small moments in which Helen had taken Beverly's framing as the frame, in which she had heard the story of me as Beverly told it, and had no particular reason to question it. Because why would she question someone she had known and trusted her entire life? I understood how it happened. I did not hold the specific mechanism against her. I didn't say it was okay. I said, "I know, Aunt Helen. If you've ever had to choose between keeping the peace and protecting your child, or protecting yourself, I want to hear from you." Because the moment that order was read, I felt relief and grief at exactly the same time. And I think that combination is one of the truest feelings that comes out of situations like this. Drop it in the comments if you know what I mean. The weeks after the hearing were quiet in a way I hadn't planned for. I had been operating at a steady background level of readiness for so long, checking the phone, noting the timestamps, building the folder, preparing for the next escalation, that when the silence came, I didn't immediately know what to do with it. It felt like the absence of something I had forgotten was there. It took about a week before I stopped reaching for my phone every hour out of habit. Ivy returned to school the following Monday without incident. She saw the school counselor twice over the next few weeks, at Mrs. Patterson's suggestion. Ivy reported that the counselor's office had a fish tank with 4 fish, which she had named by the second visit. She found this arrangement satisfactory. She drew more in those weeks than she had in a long time. Pages of it, evening after evening at the kitchen table. Our apartment, the east-facing kitchen window, the two of us together in the morning light. The view from the living room. Small, specific, real things. She drew the space we had made with the care of someone who wanted to get it exactly right, who understood on some level that this was worth documenting. By late April, there were 8 drawings on the refrigerator, overlapping slightly at the edges, the way her school art projects overlapped when she couldn't choose a favorite. Several days after the hearing, a handwritten letter arrived in my mailbox. Real stationery, a fine-tipped pen, the kind of letter that people almost never write anymore. Helen wrote, "Lara, I don't know how to make